ASG convention. He presently teaches courses of transitional commercial laws, bankruptcy, insolvency and restructuring, law of contracts, sale of goods, private international law in the postgraduate and undergraduate law degree programs. He has previously taught papers of law of property, banking laws and negotiable instruments, international commercial arbitration, law of tort and consumer protection, legal and constitutional history, jurisprudence, legal methods. He is also the research director of the Center for Transnational Commercial Law, CTCL, at NLU Delhi. He is continuing with National Law University Delhi as a regular faculty member since 2009. He has previously worked as a lecturer at the Amity Law School, IP University Delhi, for over 6 years during 2002 and 2009. He has been a visiting faculty at the National Law University Orissa, Cuttack, the Indian Law Institute, Amity Business School, Noida. He has also acted as a consultant to the Directorate of Legal Education of the Bar Council of India. Sir's resume is a very elaborate one. We all welcome you here, sir. Thank you so much for taking out time and gracing this talk. Thank you so much. I would like to invite sir to deliver the talk. Thank you so much.
Good evening, dear students. Thank you, Ganesh. Thank you, Team Think India, for this very welcome opportunity to address upcoming law professionals, budding law scholars, and I'm sure you would be really interested to identify the core areas in which you would want to pursue further. So be it profession, academics, policy, there's a lot of avenues opening up for you these days. I would like to thank, first I would like to again congratulate Think India for organizing such events, talks on the current developments, contemporary issues regarding the legal aspects. The topic that has been given to me today is alternative dispute resolution. Now, what is alternative dispute resolution? As the name states, alternative dispute resolution is a scheme or a method to resolve disputes outside the formal court process. So this was the initial definition, or a widespread definition, that there is a formal adjudicatory mechanism, and when people have disputes, grievances, they will go to the formal adjudicatory forum, that are the courts. The courts will look into the substantive law issues, whether the parties who has actually suffered grievance and what is the substantive law, and then as per the procedural law, the trial or the dispute resolution process would continue. There will be a verdict, a judgment, which will be sort of a decision upon the dispute. Now this is the formal, if we can consider the simplistic model of a formal adjudicatory process, dispute resolution mechanism. Now when we consider the alternate to this mechanism, what do we feel? Well, first, what are the thoughts? What is the alternative for? So alternative for the forum, or alternative for probably some sort of a law as well. So as we have discussed, there are three main, if we may say, three main actors in the adjudicatory process. One actor is the adjudicatory mechanism, that is the court, tribunal. Another is the substantive law, another is the procedural law. So to understand the need for ADR, we need to identify where in these three actors lie the need for maybe reform, or need to further, even if we don't want to use the term reform, we certainly would want to know where we can make it more efficient, where lies the efficiency. So probably we have come to a sort of a conclusion that first we need to look into the procedural law. Substantive law is okay, more or less, and there are more or less amendments going on. The judiciary is solidifying the principles. In case any reform is required, there are certain interpretative aspects which are being considered, certain innovation techniques are being used to continue with the substantive law. So more or less what we require is some certain change in the procedural law and certainly the adjudicatory forum. So we move to an alternative forum. So we have a forum, let's say arbitration. Arbitration, if there is an institution, if there is a formal arbitration law, that is a procedural law, that also becomes a formal process, right? So considering we started from a stage where there was only one formal adjudicatory forum and there was one formal adjudicatory procedural law. Then stage 2 we shifted to an alternative, but again there was a formal adjudicatory forum in the form of a institutional arbitration mechanism and in the form of a arbitration act. Then is it the end of the ADR process, or do we need further? Do we need to go further? So probably we need to go further because we still require that efficiency. Efficiency again in the procedural law as well as the adjudicatory forum. So what next now? So what is ADR? So the purpose of this initial dialogue is to identify that what is the constituent of ADR and what is the comprehensive, or how can you understand ADR process. Certainly there was a time when arbitration was also into the ADR definition. Today also it is widely considered arbitration is also ADR, maybe, but probably we will reach to a conclusion, or we will reach to a stage where arbitration will not be considered to be an ADR mechanism. However, this is still sort of a work in progress. It is not a conclusive definition, but yes, it is a debatable issue whether you consider arbitration to be a ADR mechanism or not. So hence the focus of current discussion is what are the further alternatives, or what are the true ADR mechanisms that are required today. So for that we basically recognize conciliation or mediation and then there is negotiation. So now in 2002 the UNCITRAL came out with a model law, that was model law on international commercial conciliation, and that was also a reason why we incorporated, and there was a particular reason why conciliation was being distinguished from mediation, and there was a particular reason why the Arbitration Act included the term Arbitration and Conciliation Act. However, the contemporary discourse, the global discourse with respect to conciliation and mediation has slightly changed. It is widely accepted and it has been officially endorsed by the UN body, the UNCITRAL Working Group 2, that they have made a proposal to remove the term conciliation and replace it with mediation. Hence, the previous debate and discussions upon the distinction between mediation and conciliation no longer holds good. So for all practical purposes, it is the same. So now we are left with mediation and negotiation. So what is mediation or conciliation and what is negotiation? So mediation is that there is a active involvement. So initial debate between mediation and conciliation was whether there is an active mediation, active involvement of trying to reach a settlement, or a passive involvement. However, this distinction or this sort of a emphasis is no longer valid. It has been practically considered, with the help of several cases, illustrations, that it is probably not a very good idea to have a compartmentalization in definitions with respect to the role of this particular individual who will play the role of a mediator or a conciliator. It's practically you want a person who will help in reaching at a particular settlement. So what is now the role of this individual or this institution who organizes this role of conciliation or mediation or negotiation between the parties? So in the present globalized world, what is required? There are a high level of complicated commercial transactions. There are cross-border transactions not only commercial but also family. People move out, they live in different countries, so there are families, weddings, people living out of weddings also. There are children, adoption, there are trusts, fairly vast arena of issues ranging from commercial to family and wealth management, trusts, and so on. So when we have so many issues, probably we cannot say that this is commercial arbitration, but yes, certainly there will be commercial mediation, there will be commercial negotiation. However, mediation transcends this aspect because there will be a particular role which this particular mediator will be required to play. So let's take one aspect of the acknowledgement or the suitability of a particular expert. Suitability of a particular expert like a mediator. So what could be the concerns in the mind of an individual or an organization if he wants to organize, if they want to appoint or invite an individual for mediation or for conciliation or for negotiation? So in today's world, one thing certainly will play a major role is this. I'm not quoting from my views, but there are two prominent thought processes from the modern US thinking. One is from a MIT Harvard Law School, another is from the Chicago Law School. And thinking, one view is that if some individuals air their views on social media, they try to align themselves with a particular movement. So they are voicing their opinion in consonance with a particular movement. This means that this shows their personal bias. So mediator is required to be impartial, and once a personal trait is seen that they are showing their opinion favoring some view, this means that there is a personal trait, which means that, well, this can be a cause of thinking or concern for the prospective clients. But a divergent view is, well, in US, everything starts and ends with Trump. So in the Trump era, well, if you are not vocal, if you don't voice your opinions, does it mean that you agree with Trump? Or then what do you do? So certainly you have to voice your opinion, but there has to be a discrete way in which the opinion is voiced. So certainly these are two contrasting views. I do not adhere to either of these views, but you being academics, you should be very careful and you should take note about these research aspects. These are trends, these are research aspects. Why are these trends? Because these are the trends which weigh most on the minds of a prospective client on whom to appoint the mediator. So now I would like to also say something about a mediation settlement agreement. So what is a mediation settlement agreement? So what is the, why can a particular forum or a particular form of ADR be effective? Why would people agree to adopt and recognize a particular form of ADR? The strongest aspect would be the enforceability, and that is the prominent reason why arbitrators, lawyers, they discourage mediators and negotiations, because they say, well, it is non-binding, and ultimately you spend that money, you spend that time in mediation, and ultimately you will go back to arbitration, you will spend that money and you will spend that time again. So that was the initial hesitance, this was the initial discouragement that was there in the system. So what can the system, nation, the government do to ameliorate this situation, to make the enforceability or the credibility of these ADR mechanisms more strong, more potent? How can that be? So what is the utility of a mediation? So there will be a settlement. And what is that settlement? There should be an agreement. For family matters, well, there is a discussion. We knew in ancient Indian times, and even now in indigenous village panchayats, there is just a oral verbal hearing discussion, and there is a oral verbal sort of a conclusion and a verdict, and people agree, people abide with it. So there is a recognition of authority. So it's not whether it is written or unwritten, it is the sanctity of the process and the authority of the actors, the players or the arbitrators or the mediators in that process. So in commercial or modern ADR processes, how can the enforceability be strengthened? Assuming that nearly all of the mediations will be recorded, they will go through a process of a mediation settlement agreement, and if that mediation settlement agreement can be enforced, then this will raise the confidence of the people to go for these processes. So in what are the ways, and in India, do we in India recognize the mediation settlement agreements? And utility in the modern global world, that is cross-border mediation settlement agreements, whether they can be enforceable, as the award, because we have the New York Convention for recognition and enforcement of the foreign arbitration awards. So that is the enforcement mechanism, that yes, if there is a piece of paper, and what is the sanctity of that piece of paper? The sanctity is that there is an international convention which recognizes that yes, there is an arbitration tribunal or there is an ad hoc arbitration which has been chosen by the parties, and that particular piece of paper will be registered, will be recorded with that particular, whatever is the formal process, the court registry, the district enforcement court, and then it will be, it can be transmitted to the other country, and it will be enforceable as a foreign arbitration award. So what about the mediation settlement agreement? So hence current development in the UNCITRAL working group is to propose, the work is already in progress, a draft convention is also ready. So there will be a sort of it is likely to be a parallel instrument to the New York Convention on Enforcement and Recognition of Arbitration Awards, which will be with respect to the mediation settlement agreements. So this is with respect to how the cross-border enforceability of the ADR mechanisms can be strengthened and enforced. What about the domestic process in India? What we are concerned is, first, what is the rule in India? So in India, you should be very happy that the judiciary is very active. I would not say proactive, but the judiciary is active in the correct direction. The Delhi High Court, so there was a very recent case. Interestingly, the Delhi High Court was seized with a case with respect to a check dishonor, and there was a case under section 138. Now, case under section 138 is a criminal proceeding. So can ADR be possible? Can mediation be possible? Can it be possible? Cognizable offense, non-cognizable offense, compoundable offense. Well, hence, ultimately, the Delhi High Court, when it heard this particular case, they viewed the principles and they ultimately considered Section 1, negotiable instruments is primarily a civil law, and it's only that the offense of check dishonor has been considered to be a criminal offense, and there can be a criminal trial. But this doesn't inherently make the check dishonor into a inherently criminal offense. It is basically a civil wrong, and hence, considering this reasoning, they proposed a ADR mechanism, a mediation and a settlement mechanism. And interestingly, the mediation settlement agreement was also drawn, and in that particular case, the Delhi High Court also outlined a few essentials. Around 5 or 6 essential points have been enumerated, that these are the points which are required to be mentioned in the mediation settlement agreement, and the parties, with their full consent, they sign on it, and then it can be enforced. It can be enforced because it is agreed to by the parties as a contract. So again, the discussion can be whether this can be recognized as a decree of the court or by virtue of this being considered as a contractual bindingness between the parties. So certainly it is not a decree of the court because it is not an order, but any agreement is a contract, and every contract is a constitution of rights and obligations between the parties. So parties willingly and with their full consent enter into this agreement or a constitution of rights and obligations, and a breach of which will give rise to the other, the rights to enforce the breach in a court of law. So this is a short discussion upon what my view and what are certain current contemporary developments on the ADR processes. Now I would like to say a few words about the transnational law. So again, whenever we move into the cross-border domain, the transnational law is, what is transnational law? So the genesis is by Philip Jessup, 1949. He wrote a book, and the title was Transnational Law. Nearly at the same time, Milton Friedman also started a Journal of Transnational Law, and the definition initially coined by Philip Jessup was that it is interstitial between the international law and the domestic law. So what then is a transnational law, and what is the use, or what are the apprehensions? So we start by understanding what is international law. International law is made so that by the nations, and then every country will adopt that law as their law. So there is a discussion, and whenever the law is made, it has to be adopted by the country. So you can, only choice is you can leave it, you can choose not to implement it, but then that carries a great risk. Then apart from that, by way of custom, a country may be exposed, and the international law may be in any case be imposed on a particular jurisdiction. So the purpose of law is that there should be participation in lawmaking, and there should be some opportunity available to the state to reform the law or suitably amend the law, or there should be open, it should be open for judicial interpretation. Law has an element which is sui generis. So international law, there will be a considerable restriction upon domestic jurisprudence. So what is then transnational law? So whenever there is whenever a country wants to make a legislation, they think of making a legislation, they look for references from different countries. So we all know about transplants. So law is transplant. Roman law was working fine. The Britishers used the Roman law in their way. The civil law, French, German, they